Welcome back to the Mountain Morning Show, where I could not be happier than to have Rich Woodruff here with the National Red Cross or American Red Cross, I should say, to be specific. And he is, of course, the Marketing and Communications Director for the region here, the Utah and Nevada regions. Welcome. It's great to have you here.
Good to be here.
So I like I got to say, Red Cross Red or Valentine's Red.
Well, you could
that
go
going.
either way.
Yeah.
You know.
It seems appropriate either way. I was suggesting to people that today, it seems like Valentine's Day would be a good day to give some blood. You know,
great lead-in. Yeah. The need is constant. We just we're kind of on the tail end of a real critical shortage with all the canceled blood drives, the weather. You know, primarily December and January. And November. So we're still kind of.
There's always a need.
Oh, there is.
Right.
Yeah. We always say the need's constant.
I think people don't understand. Sometimes they're like, "Oh, I've got O positive." I do too, and they think, "Well, they don't need that." The truth is that that's the most common, so of course they do.
Well, you're in an emergency situation, you're going to grab blood, right?
Yeah.
You don't have time to test, so that's always a need. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So think about that today. That might be something to do with your significant other today, tomorrow, this week.
Sure.
Always good to give to the Red Cross. The other part of this, too, is that the Red Cross is a busy organization year-round. There is always something happening in this country where you guys find yourselves deployed, so to speak.
Yeah.
And right now, that's well, not only northern Utah, but certainly, as you mentioned, Nevada and some of these other places are in critical shape. The Oroville Dam is keeping you very busy.
Yeah. Well, you look at the snowpack. What are we? I don't know, 200% of normal. So you got all this snow. You get a little warmer temperatures. You get all this moisture. You get rain, and it's a recipe for flooding, and so it is playing out that way, and so we're very busy.
Talk to me about Oroville Dam and what's going on there on the ground.
Well, we're deploying assets very quickly. You know, we're trying to lean forward on that. 200,000 evacuated, and I think we've got, at last count, over 2,000 in Red Cross shelters.
Wow.
So we're hoping for the best, preparing for the worst, as is everybody. It's the spillway is really deteriorating. It's at risk, and so it's a very, very, no pun intended, fluid situation. But but it's going to be a big one for us.
This, to kind of cover what the Red Cross does in a situation like this, it's multifaceted.
Yes.
The response is, of course, to help with getting folks to support that they might need from if they're injured or if they need to get other services. You guys are right there to get them to the right people. That's
correct.
part of it.
Yeah.
Organizing and arranging shelter for those folks, another part of it. But also communication.
Sure.
Another critical part of what the American Red Cross does. Talk about that in this particular situation especially.
Well, you've got communication can imply a lot of different things. Just connecting in a disaster can be a challenge because a lot of traditional cell phones go down, towers go down, so social media becomes important, ham radio becomes important, connecting with our emergency services partners. So there's got to be a lot of communication among all the players so we make sure that we're taking care of the people that are really affected by whatever that disaster is.
Wow. Yeah. And then, of course, the shelter, probably the most, I suppose for many people, the most obvious, because the American Red Cross steps up to that when there's a fire, for instance, a home fire. You guys step up for people all the time for this. But in a big situation like this, providing large shelter is something you guys are really key on. Yeah,
we're teed up. We have the assets. We have, the capability. No other non-government agency really does have the footprint and the capability that we do. So when you get a big disaster like Hurricane Matthew, Louisiana flooding, and it's all hands on deck, we had 2,000-3,000 volunteers on the ground and a lot of stuff. So this is kind of what we train for and prepare for, and then when it happens, we're at the ready. So
talk about how people could be part of that. As you said, lots of volunteers.
Yeah.
There are always some opportunities for people to be part of that.
Sure. Well, the Red Cross mission depends on basically the power of volunteerism and the generosity of donors. So you look at those two factors. You can give time, you can give money, and of course you can give blood. That's part of our mission as well. But in a disaster scenario, volunteerism is a big part of that equation, as is financial support.
Yeah, the financial support, easy to do. You can go to the website and give support to the American Red Cross. That's probably the front line of that side of it. Of course, you can visit the American Red Cross and make a donation as well.
Sure.
Let's talk about the other side of this, and that is preparedness. American Red Cross is big on making sure that people are able to help themselves first, right? That is a big part of it, because if you're to get to the people who have the most critical need, all others need to manage as much as they can. And you talk about this. We've come on this program and talked about making sure you have a 24-hour kit, making sure you have shelter for yourself if you need it, space blankets, things like that to survive.
Sure.
Talk about how that becomes, in a situation like this, a big part of what folks need to be thinking about, especially with the addition of apps and things like that.
Well, we live in three worlds. We call it, internally we call it disaster cycle services. That cycle is prepare, respond, recover. So at any given time, we're involved in some aspect of that. So right now, we're talking about preparedness because we're preparing for flooding. We're in the middle of flooding. And so you want people to know in advance, okay, if the flood comes, if the wildfire comes, or the earthquake, how am I going to be prepared to minimize the trauma of going through this event?
Right, and there's some important parts of that kind of step into some of these other areas, like, for instance, we mentioned communication. Having a comm plan for your family is important. Where's your rally point? How are we going to touch other people out of state? Who's our out-of-state contact to make sure that everybody knows we're okay, right? Those are all parts of that.
Our apps have a feature called I'm Safe.
I'm Safe.
I'm Safe, and we have a whole initiative about reconnecting families. And so when you have these apps, you can load it up with the contacts that you want to know that you're safe. So even in other parts of the country, I mean, the apps are national. They've got shelter locations right now, real-time information, weather information. And if you do want to reconnect, let your family know you're safe, you just push that button and they'll get that notification.
So cool. The American Red Cross thinking about the electronic age with new apps and new ways to communicate, and of course new ways to find assistance.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look at what we're able to do at this point and our future as far as events like this, how confident are you in everyone's ability to recover, especially for the Red Cross, to make sure that's able to happen?
That's a great question, because recovery, a lot of times the media focuses on the response and the disaster.
Sure they do. How fast did they get there? Where was FEMA when we needed them, right?
Yeah. And then as it plays out, it's very expensive. It's long term. You know, I mean, we're still in recovery mode with flooding in Louisiana and Matthew.
That's right.
It can go on for months.
There's still people that are in temporary shelters that we're still trying to get into homes.
It's transition back to recovery. So we shift into a mode of being a sort of an advocate. We don't do all the recovery, but we help refer them maybe for housing support, say FEMA, health services, mental health services, anything that they need to try to get back on their feet. We become a good resource because we're very collaborative. So it plays out over the long term, and it does cost money to assist in the recovery. So we look at, people think, I'll just donate to the disaster, but then there is a recovery afterwards.
Indeed. Well, as a communications director, we know that you've gone out there, leaned forward, and made sure that that all those departments are communicating properly, and that we can get the assistance we need for folks who need it. The American Red Cross, if folks have more questions and where can they go to do more, the American Red Cross website is?
redcross.org. Real simple.
Really easy. All right.
Try to make it easy.
You can go head down to Murray, to their location, to get blood, to offer assistance in way of volunteering, and of course financial assistance, always welcomed at the American Red Cross. Mostly what they need is you to participate and communicate as well. We got a lot more coming up here on the Mountain Morning Show. We will be back right after this.